Ladies and gentlemen, it is Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. That can only mean one thing. It is time for LUMA's Work From Home webinar series. Welcome to episode 3 of season 2 of the series. It's the only series that we are hoping gets canceled prematurely. Because look, I hope we're not working from home forever. So yes, we do want to be canceled, but we're not canceled quite yet, right? After 7 episodes of season 1, we were renewed for season 2. And so here we are in season 2. And I am super excited today. We're going to have a conversation around a topic that I think is on a lot of people's minds. And unfortunately, in part because it's an omnipresent sort of issue in everyone's life, which is to say their career, but also now because of the unfortunate, reactions and responses of many companies to this crisis, with a lot of uncertainties about the future and spend and where revenues are coming in. Companies are making the tough but probably fair decisions around right sizing, and that can have a unfortunate consequence of taking optionality out of the hands of some people. And so there's lots of people looking for jobs, or they may find that depending upon how long this downturn takes, they may be forced into a position to start thinking about other careers, or absolutely nothing happens from the company standpoint, but given these significant machinations and changes, they ought to think about doing something maybe more proactively. So I'm delighted to have a conversation. I think we titled it Careers in a Time of Crisis. And let's see, just bear with me here. I'm gonna share my screen and we'll go through the preamble. So careers in a time of crisis. Many of you who join on a regular basis, Wednesdays at 2 p.m. This is our version of Appointment TV. It's our fixed schedule for LUMA's Work From Home webinar series. So here we are, as I mentioned, in episode 3 of season 2. We've covered off podcasting with Sheila Spence. We last week had a in-depth discussion of strategic exit considerations and a presentation entitled The Art of the Exit. I did that with my partner and colleague, Mark Greenbaum. And today we're going to talk careers in a time of crisis. Tune in next week. Don't miss next week because I have my good friend and longtime collaborator, Rashad Tabakawala of Publicis, and of a great first-time author who had an amazing book on staying human in an age of data. Rashad has always been, I've always been attracted to his thinking and his narratives because Rashad, unlike so many, it seems, in industry, and in particular in the marketing industry, has not sort of succumbed to the groupthink, corporate think, pay to play BS that so many people seem to be constrained by. He is unfiltered, objective, and cuts right to the heart of the issues. And if you get an industry that's as dynamic as ours, to lose that capability or to have that capability is an incredibly valuable. It cuts to the chase and it's very insightful. And so we're going to have a conversation about radical candor. I'm, kind of known or renowned or whatever, infamous for my radical candor. I simply was born without a filter and never acquired one. So that ought to be a fascinating conversation. No holds barred. I'm pretty sure we will go places and name names. So stay tuned next Wednesday, May 27th, 2 p.m. Eastern, when I'm joined by Rashad Tabakawala for a conversation about radical candor. Speaking of radical and candor, I am joined today by my good friend, Kelly Hoey. And, Kelly and I have known each other for quite some time. In fact, you know what? I'm going to go, as attractive as she is in her leopard skin, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Stop sharing. There we go. So hopefully you can see us directly. Kelly, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored to be part of this series.
Yeah. So Kelly and I have known, as I mentioned, been known each other for a long time. She, in fact, she attended my wedding, you know, back in the crustacean period. And, you know, I knew Kelly. Kelly was like a fellow Canadian. Let's get that disclosure out there. But was a lawyer, then involved in law management. And then sort of you had a stint of time where you did a variety of things, from investing to these groups, all as near as I can tell around technology, mobile, empowering women. There was a series of activities that you took part in until about, what, 5 years ago, you became a renowned author, and the author of Build Your Dream Network, which is the most incredible book. And I'm not saying that because you're on my webinar here today. I really see all my earmarks. I have found this to be a great book. It's a book about networking, but it isn't, in the sense that I think there's a lot of applications in this book that you could sort of apply to life in general. And if there was anything, I had two main takeaways when I read this book and when I reread this book, because one of the nice things about a well-written book is it becomes a resource and you just sort of keep it there handy on the shelf and refer to it. And the two observations I had, Kelly, were that one, not think of networking as Omni. So again, people think of networking, oh, it's a schmooze fest at some cocktail party, or it has to do with LinkedIn, or it has to do with business cards. Bullshit. Your book says, no. Networking is everything. So it's Omni. Whatever you do, that's networking. And then, second, that it's always on. So there is no, you don't go to a conference to network. You don't engage in networking functionality, and you don't network when you need it. You just sort of, maintain it, feed it, keep it healthy, because you never know when you're going to need it. And the analogy I thought of when I was reading this book is this notion of the HVAC repair. I know you probably haven't heard this one before, but if your AC unit goes out, let me guess, it's going to go out when it's 88 and 90% humidity, right? You need a fix. You need it right away. Well, number one, the HVAC repairman doesn't have an appointment until next Thursday. So you got to sweat it out, Jackie. And number two is it's going to be like $2,500 for him to show up and just have a look. And they always tell you, take the service plan. It's $1,500 a year, but that means you get a prioritized list when you need help, and we'll come in and maintain it so that A, it'll go down less often, and B, you'll be better prepared when it does. And I think of your approach to networking like HVAC contracts. If you nurture, if you have it in place, if it's a healthy and ongoing thing, then you're not in this weird circumstance where you have to use it in an emergency. What say you, Kelly?
I like that, and I've never thought of that as the HVAC description of networking. I kind of like it. I mean, so yes, there's always this, we say the word networking, and people think of the verb, that activity, where what you're really talking about is the noun. Who are the relationships you have around you all the time that you can lean into, lean on, pull in to help you? And so when you talk about my book and what's it about, it's about how we get things done, and we get things done with the help of other people. And if there's a networking pearl in there besides show up every day for your network, it's like, don't be a jerk. Like, don't be a jerk. Don't be a jerk. Sum it up. Write that down. Be the person other people want to help, because you're exactly right. we think of it as this schmoozy activity that we have to pull out in a time of need. And that's the worst time.
Right.
The worst time, when you're vulnerable, you're demoralized, you're anxious. The worst time to think, how can I get other people to help me? Versus, had I been there every day for people, they're going to come rushing to me. Hey, how can I give you a hand?
Right, right. So walk us through I mean, look, I'm serious when I say I'm a huge fan of this book, and everyone should rush out and get it available on Amazon. Talk me through A, why you wrote it, and B, sort of you've now been on 5 years of book tours and conversations and dialogue about the principles of this book. What are the ones that maybe not the ones that you necessarily laid out, but the ones that resonated the most in terms of your audiences?
Okay. So why write this book? And this would be good for, anyone who's watching this and thinking, I'm thinking about a what next, either voluntarily or involuntarily. Listen to your network. And if they're not screaming it at you, ask them, what am I good at? So I finally listened to my network. And after a variety of careers, as you described, the common thread was this way I pattern match, see connections, and sort of execute ideas based on who are the relationships and networks. And I probably falsely, portray to the world as an extrovert, but I am not. So for me, how you keep in touch with people, how you show up every day, the little drips of things is far more important than, the grandiose showing up at a cocktail party. Things that have resonated with readers, because that always fascinates me, and had a few interviews recently.
You're basically telling me this is self-help. You wrote this book to help yourself.
You know what? It's like, they always talk about like finding your career and all that kind of stuff. It's like, it was nice sort of at age 50 to finally find the career that I'd always wanted and had been striving for, right? So, sometimes this thing you should do is so obvious, it's right in front of your face and you don't realize it. I mean, right. In the acknowledgments in the back, that one of the first people I thank is a former boss of mine who back in around 2006, 2006 said to me, you need to tell people what you do in terms of networking. And I told him he was an idiot. And then a decade later, I had to tell him he was right. I probably put some profanities in front of idiot, but anyhow, the point was, you've got to listen to your network. And if you're struggling right now because you see the writing on the wall with your job, or you see the writing on the wall with your industry, or you're like, this isn't for me anymore, given where, work has gone, I need to find something new. Like, stop and think, what are the things my network asked me for? What are the ways they champion me? Is this the stuff that I want to do? And if you don't know, ask them, say, what am I good at? And it's a great exercise.
Yeah, I think what you're good at and a nice fit between your capabilities and a need in the marketplace or a position with a company is kind of like obvious. That sort of table stakes component to sort of job search. But something you said struck me. I mean, you started off by saying, be nice, like don't be an asshole, right? Because things have a way of coming around, like, careful of how you treat people on the way up, because on the way down, she's a doozy.
Right.
And I have, I mean, kind of obvious and true, right, in terms of how one conducts oneself. But it seems to me a lot of this should not be hard. It should not be, hang on a second, I better be nice to people as a concerted strategy just in case. It's like, hopefully, right, folks, this is something that's right. You're going to enjoy yourself so much more if you're just not a intolerable prick.
Right. Like, is it that hard to you know, you jump on a team meeting on video. Is it that hard to say to someone, hey, how's it going? I remember yesterday you said your child had a whatever exam. Like, is it that hard to do those sorts of things? Like, so for some people, clearly it is. And I'm just saying, those matter more than the perfectly crafted cover letter.
Right.
Or, you know, back in the day, the perfectly orchestrated cocktail party. Like, how, I mean, I think of your events that you've done for LUMA over the years and your digital media summit. I mean, people flock to that because of how you show up all the time, not like, oh, gee, once a year, Terry throws a party, right? Mm-hmm. So people need to think about that. Like, how do you show up every day?
Well, and let's face it, you know, beyond sort of entry-level recruiting, which, you know, I'm not talking about entry-level recruiting here. I mean, it is a lot about who you know, right? Your network, and not necessarily, you know, someone's going to do you a favor and slot you in, but to the extent that they have options and they know you, and there's a level of trust and there's a level of comedy, you know, with you that's comedy, not comedy, but
I think comedy's, I think the comedy part.
It's gotta be someone, right? They gotta hire someone. So why not someone with whom they have a relationship? So it's kind of.
But exactly. Well, think about how with big companies, what happens now, like an online portal for submissions of resumes and applications and job listings. So that's completely disrupted the, you know, recruiters in the recruiting industry, so that HR and everyone just gets a, you know, they've got a funnel of people coming in. What does that mean for you if you were a hiring manager? You're going to get a big ass spreadsheet of names of qualified individuals. Wouldn't that thrill you, Terry? Yeah, wouldn't that just, that, you know? So what helps you is if someone is able to lift off this roster of qualified applications, is able to lift a name off. Right. And I lived that experience at one of my book events, happened to be in St. Catharines, Ontario, and talking about this with a guy who was a hiring manager. And one of the students at the Brock University came up and said, I'm on that list of names. The relief on this guy's face, right. Like, oh my God, I don't have to go like kind of lottery through 150 names. I might have that candidate right here, and I've saved myself time. So as someone who knows like the two pieces of this puzzle, to be able to say, this person's looking for a job, they've got the skill set, I know them, I can vouch for them. Yeah. Boy, I know this person needs great talent, and connecting those, you're helping both sides out. It's a beautiful thing.
So you're basically saying these are hacks to a data problem, a scale problem, right? You've got all these, you know, undifferentiated sort of applicants, or, you know, all sort of supply, and you're trying to seek out, you know, signals from noise. I remember when I was in charge of Canadian recruiting at Solomon Brothers back in the early 90s, we would recruit analysts we discovered Canada way before anybody else, which was an amazing sort of comparative advantage until everyone else figured it out, and then it was competitive. But we'd go to University of Calgary and University of British Columbia, two schools that had excellent undergraduate finance departments. But we'd say, listen, why should we do the hard work? We hardwired it with the finance professor. We just call him up and go, just give me your top 10 in rank order. And he'd do that, so that when we came in, we kind of knew to whom, you know, we were likely gonna, and sure enough, it kind of mapped perfectly. Of course, you know, we'd make 10 offers and we'd get 10 acceptances because, you know, it was Canada and you could come to New York and all kinds of great stuff. So it phenomenally increased our effectiveness and efficiency of that recruitment process because we had a filter. We had someone who knew the candidates, spent years with them, and they could sort of short circuit that. Obviously that hack doesn't apply to everywhere in life, but this notion of the third party reference is enormous in a world where you're overrun with supply data.
Right, and this is also where having like that trusted third party reference, knowing what sort of like both sides of the equation need. And the example I always use in this instance is, you know, when someone wants to meet an investor, and I will endlessly get emails from people who will say to me, oh, can you introduce me to? I've got an X or a Y that would be perfect for them.
Yep.
And my response always is, why do they want to hear from you?
Yeah.
Like, hey, it might be good for you to meet fill in the blank.
Yep.
Right? And I'll give an example of someone we both know, Chris Freilich. I had an email from so someone had a startup and they wanted to meet Chris Freilich. And I'm like, well, why does he want to meet you?
Who doesn't want to meet with Chris Freilich? I mean, honestly.
You know what? Put that in the chat and then we'll all make fun of you. But I know, like, Chris has written about his email inbox and the volume of email, and I'm like, I'm not adding to that unless it's worthwhile for him. So Chris, if you're watching this, I asked this startup, I said, tell me what's in it for Chris and send me that and I'll take a look at it and I'll think about emailing him. That was about 8 years ago and I'm still waiting for that email, Chris.
Listen, I think conduits, there's a responsibility. If you're a conduit and you value your relationships with people, you can't just willy-nilly, pass these things on. You're absolutely right about two-way value proposition. And I'm a big believer in double opt-in. So I'm like, oh, you want to meet with this person? Great. I'll email, in that case, Chris Freilich and say, do you want to meet with this person? And if the answer is no, it's like, say, there's got to be.
Oh, have to do the double opt-in. But also, like, when you want to meet someone, like, not like, oh, well, they look interesting. Oh, Terry's career looks interesting. I'd like to talk. No.
Yeah.
Like, you got to do the work. Do the work, be specific. And I don't care if you're looking for a job, looking for investment, whatever it is, even if they're informational interviews.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much information on the internet. Crazy thing, huh, Terry? You can just Google and find stuff.
So I want to get back to the notion of sort of what people can and should do right now. We're obviously in a strange circumstance with the lockdown. I know that I want to talk about sort of how you and I approach this. I know, my thinking was when we were going into the lockdown, clearly, I said, well, wait a second. What would we be doing if we weren't in this lockdown? We'd probably be at conferences speaking about topics in and around the sector. Why don't we just do that from home? And, we were just transitioning to Zoom as our conference calling platform. And, oh, look at this, they have a webinar feature. We could launch our own webinar where we talk about these topics. And we thought the purpose of this would be sort of as a value contribution. Hopefully this is helpful to folks to sort of machinate around these issues. 2 was to sort of stay current with our network and be in front of them, doing what we would otherwise be doing. And quite frankly, 3rd, something to keep me busy because idle hands are the devil. I don't know what I'd be up to. I mean, I already did 3 parody videos in the first 2 weeks, and that just couldn't keep going. So the notion of how am I going to stay busy? So and the feedback's been amazing. The participation's been amazing. I'm so glad we did it. We get a lot of people saying, "Hey, this is super helpful," but we never did it with this notion of what can we get out of it. We just said, how can we help? How can we contribute in a time when people are hurting?
But that's what you've always been about, right? And I think that's the thing right now, whether you're an individual, wanting to connect with your network, or you're a company connecting with your community.
Yep.
Where were you before lockdown and what did you do? And I think the difference in terms of people doing outreach, or it's like, oh yeah, we're going to ramp up our marketing kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Were you there before, or are you just showing up at the door now? And that's like
sort of disingenuous, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's like, no, right? So it doesn't surprise me. You have always been, you could call it marketing. You as an individual, you as a company, you as a brand, sorry to put it that way, have always been very generous. And I look at it as like how you can be of service to your community. And that's very much when I think about it, like, how can you be of service? Sharing information, even if it's about yourself, can be of service if you approach it that way. How can I inform or delight or educate my audience, my network, so it is helpful for them?
Right.
Can I improve their life? Can I give them something that they can apply? Could they do that? Maybe someone watches this and they say, it's not me, but I got some friends who have been laid off, or you know, my kid's internship, you know, was canceled. What could they learn from that? You mean, you can have that kind of ripple effect. But I think it's really important to note, and this is not just because you're a friend, because if I was sitting here blowing smoke up your ass, you would tell me I was blowing smoke up your ass. But you can watch what you've done, and you are consistently doing things and staying engaged. If you had gone silent right now, that would have been more disconcerting than you ramping up the parody in this series.
Right. Well, I've always believed in this notion of sort of give first, right? Lead with giving. And just because, you know, I once said to somebody, 95% of the things I do at LUMA have no direct remunerative effect. Like, in other words, you know, yes, what I do on clients, maybe that's too high, but a lot of what I do, publishing of the LUMAscapes, the content that we do, the events we put on, some of it, you know, leads to deals, but a lot of it is just sort of the benefit for the general, for the industry. But that's part of my belief that, well, I should be doing this. I always feel like an obligation. Let's do this. It feels like, by the way, I feel better about it. I mean,
well, it's such a better way to stay top of mind with your network than, got any deals for me? Got a job for me? Got deals? Could you imagine?
And if you want to differentiate, it's sadly, right, I'm going to belong to a profession of largely, you know, transactional mindset of a lot of the intermediaries. And so they're thinking about, you know, deal, can you sign me up? And it's like, that it's one of the premises that I've had thinking about careers, which is take a breath, slow down, play the long ball. I remember as an associate at Salomon Brothers, and I think it was my second or maybe third year, they grouped us in these 3 groups of compensation because what else matters? And there was the bottom group that was like out of a class of 70, I think it was like 10 people. There was the top group, I think there was only like 3 or 4. And then there was the middle, basically everybody else. And so I get compensated in the middle. And I'm furious. I'm like, yeah, I should be in the top group. And my boss, I remember him distinctly, Eduardo Mestre, who said to me, calm down. If in fact what you're saying is true, think about it. If you're basically making the claim that we made this gradation error, that you should have been in this top group. Let's assume you're correct. Let's assume we made that mistake and you should be there. Well, over time that will correct itself. And right now the delta between the top group and the middle group is like $15,000. In other words, chicken feed, right? Compared to what will occur in a differentiation if you truly are, you know, gapped out from the average over the course of your career. And he was like so right. I had to take him. I wasn't seeing straight, right? So I just sort of said, well, I'll take him for his word. Oh my God. I mean, you know, years later, I'm in the top group, and the delta between the top group and the bottom group is like denominated in millions, not in thousands. So what a huge advantage to take an approach of saying, yeah, we're all gonna live to 100. Our careers are gonna be defined in such different ways than probably we even anticipated when we started said careers. When, let's face it, you know, for people of our vintage, you know, there were still people getting the watch after 25 years. In other words, you know, you worked at a place for a long period of time, maybe not your entire career, but you took these career, your notion of career was something you did, and then it was over, and then you retired. And I just don't think we're gonna live that world anymore. All the more reason to keep that sort of always on refreshment of relationships alive, and to sort of pace yourself as it relates to approaches and where you get anxious and what you need to accomplish by when.
Well, and you know what, your idea of the pause, you know, this is right now, and thinking of a conversation I had earlier on, you know, people trying to rush through this time period to get to the new normal. And if you're rushing, you're missing opportunity. Yep. If you're rushing, you're not listening, you're not observing, you're not watching and seeing how things are unfolding and where new opportunities can be created. Yep. You know, you might be rushing to, so to say, I need the same as I had before. and sort of dragging with you like the ghost of Christmas past, a whole bunch of stuff that's not necessary. You know, do you need the title? Do you need the corner office? Do you need all that stuff? Like rather being open to something new and creative. Your example always also picks up for me as something, you know, that I was hearing. Too often with networking, people are wondering how they enter into a dialogue. And this, you know, boss of yours who was so transparent on how things worked, you know, this is for people to stop and think about right now. How are you bringing people into conversations? Because you never know, right? Rather than worrying about how it's going to help me, how can I help someone else? Because that person you help, those people you pull into conversations, they may be the people creating opportunities for you. In the never know category.
Who knows, right?
Right. We might all be reporting to our interns one day. So why not pull them into the conversation?
I'm planning on it, by the way. You know, you get these people, you know, this notion of sort of giving first. There must have been a coach or some career guru that came out and said, make sure that on every call you have, ask, what can I do for you? And so many people finish their call with, tell me how I can be helpful. What can I do for you? And I get the sentiment. I approve of the sentiment, obviously. I just find it so rote. It's like, what? I don't know. Like, to me, it feels a lot more like action speaks so much louder than words. And by the way, I'm pretty sure that all the people saying that, you know, mean it. And it's just that it sort of comes across sort of funny. I'm not a big.
Yeah, no. I'm so with. Thank you for bringing that up. It's sort of like the way when we used to go into the office and to be, hey, how are you? How was your weekend? Like we say these things,
but we don't mean them.
Well, we're not listening. We're like, okay, I got it out of my mouth. And you know, because sometimes you catch yourself and you do it 2 or 3 times. So when people like, yes, we need to give before we get, but the give, because this is often really challenging for those earlier in their career or when they're in real need, as so many people are right now. And the networking give, I say to people, like right now, clarity, be specific on what it is that you're seeking. Understand what that other person can give, right? So, you know, is it realistic to ask them for what what the information you need? Like think about their life. What's going on with them in terms of their ability to help you out? Like put yourself in their shoes. And then the give is, you know what? Be appreciative of the guidance or the advice they give you. Have patience with them in terms of how they're able to deliver up, you know, your urgency, which is not their urgency. And then let them know what you did with the information.
Right.
People who want to mentor and give advice and provide guidance aren't asking for this tit for tat. Oh, I'm sorry, Terry, I made an introduction for you. You now owe me one. No. We want to know that the introduction happened. We want to know that if you applied the information, we want to know if it led to an actual job. Just keep us informed.
You know what? You're absolutely right. I'm thinking about that in my sort of day job. My experience is, let's say someone reaches out and says, hey, could you connect me? Here's why. You know, they've done all the right, you know, they read the book and they've done all the right things in terms of, here's why I want to connect with this person, blah, 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 very specific. You do the double opt-in, you connect with them. What I love is you get and brevity is everything, right? You get a 1-sentence email, you know, a month later, FYI, connected with Bob, you know, Suzanne, discuss this, got to follow up. He connected with the team. Boom. Just thanks again. Right. It's like, great. Now I know, right? It didn't go into the ether as you described. So many people treat sort of, what do you call it? Drive-by networking?
Exactly. The kind of drive-by, the sort of the dump and the drive and dump. Like, hey, Terry, here's some, you know, they dump them in your inbox. But also too, like part of that generosity, and it gets back to where we were talking before of sort of this connector person in between, watching all of this. You may be connecting someone to Bob and Suzanne. And you know that you've done something for Bob or Suzanne before. So you want to know that Bob and Suzanne are coming through for you for this person.
Yeah, yeah.
And if this person doesn't get back to you, you're like, right? Because
Yeah.
it's got to be a continuous kind of well-oiled, generous machine.
Yeah. It's
And
currency, isn't it? It's currency.
yeah, it's currency. And so you don't want to find out later that there's someone else that you've been helping endlessly drops the ball on the one time you ask them.
Right.
No dice.
So what is with this sort of strange, I'll make an observation, and maybe it's human nature, but when people lose their job, and it happens, right? Good people lose their job. I have noticed that the general tendency of people is to avoid them. Oh my God, you know, oh, scarlet letter, all this kind of stuff. I have the opposite feeling. If it's someone I know and like and respect, I rush towards them. I'm the firefighter on 9/11. Like I'm like, well, I'll be honest. Number one is, let's say they work for some big company and they've always been fairly, you know, tight-lipped. Let me tell you something. You call someone on the way out, you get the most amazing exit interview you've ever had. Like, you'll find out shit that you like, I long suspected that, because all of a sudden they're talkers, right?
Right.
No, but seriously, that's not why I do it. I'm just curious, you know, thinking of, because I get contacted all the time by companies looking for people and by people looking for jobs. And I love playing that middleman role. It's what I do in my day job. It's just that it's not companies, it's human beings. Right. And I don't have a business model that supports it, nor do I want one. It's sort of something I'm just generally doing as our good offices. But man, it's incredible the feedback I get from people who say, thank you so much for reaching out. You know, that's not their experience writ large across the industry, which shocks me. And I'm pretty sure, again, not that I'm doing this for the quid pro quo, but years later, people remember the people that were helpful when the chips were down.
Yep.
Everyone's your friend when you just got the CEO job at some big thing. Like, everyone comes out of the woodwork. Oh, congratulations. I always knew you were going to be like, you know, to those people, you're like, yeah, whatever. Like, you know, the freaking long line, right? Whereas, you know, people lose their job and you reach out to them and go, how can I be helpful? And by the way, have you thought about this and that kind of thing? And I find that it's got so much value. By the way, not a lot of cost to you, but a tremendous amount of value to the recipient.
Well, it's such a great topic to think about, and yeah, how to distinguish yourself as a decent human being, which seems to be hard for a lot of people these days.
Write it down, folks.
Right. But you're hitting on it in this, and you said this early, like good people who you know you can vouch for, and someone you have this faith in, because shit happens, and shit happens to good people, and it's not a fault of their own. And you know, other people like not having time for them because they're not fancy enough anymore, or they don't have the expense account, or whatever it is, right? So like, who can you vouch for? And showing up for them in good times and in bad, for no other reason than this is what we do as human beings. We're social creatures. We need other people. But people who are looking for a job should think about it. Like, if you're reaching out to ask people for help, were you there for them before? You know, were you really that collaborative team player? Were you the decent, you know, did you show up for others, or were you, you know, only thinking about, oh, right, who are the muckety mucks I can make a relationship with, and to heck with you peons kind of thing, right? So who were you before? Were you showing up for other people? Because, you know, whose door you darken now, you may be a ray of light at someone's door if you show up saying, hey, they you know, the firm right sized, I'm out of a job, here's what I'm looking for you to do. Or you may be like, you know, talking into the ether because you weren't there as a great colleague. Right. So, you know, you never, like, unless someone, my attitude always has been, unless someone was like kicked out of the firm because of, you know, an orange jumpsuit, you never know with people.
Yeah. And I find the best thing you can do if you're on the receiving end of that request for advice is be honest. I mean, I'm going to borrow from, you know, next week with Rashad, you know, radical candor. Yes. You know, I tell people, when people come in, and I have so many people, and hopefully this isn't doesn't start a waterfall of more, but people are always coming in either because something's happened or because they're contemplating something to happen. And by the way, I'm a big advocate of be proactive. Like if you're not enjoying your job or you think there's better, greener, then think about it in advance. Don't wait until you're in response mode. But when people come in, I tell people, and by the way, people are sometimes, I value the quality of self-awareness very, very highly. And yet some people sometimes are like, yeah, I want to be a CEO of this. I'll tell them, you're not CEO. You need more experience doing this or doing that in order to, it's not realistic. I'll tell them, look, your skill set is in this, not necessarily that. I don't care. And by the way, perfect time to be candid because they're listening, right?
Right. No, absolutely. But this might be the kind of thing too, to think about, if you've got those bigger dreams, to be able to say to someone, my bigger dream is to do this.
Right. Eventually.
Between where I am now and there, what should I do? Who should I be working with? Who should I, where are the experiences I can get to? Where can I pull all of that in so that I can forward kind of skill set and network my career to land that thing? But also on this piece of kind of running to the people who have been laid off, for those or made redundant, right size, whatever terminology, for people who are looking, this is again where I really, really stress that fact that networks can get fatigued very easily.
Right.
So who are you tapping and why? How often are you going to the well and asking for something?
Yep.
This is where being very specific, think about what you need and then the specific people or parts of your network that can help you with that, because you got to give people things that they can answer for you, because your ask in and of itself right now, hey, I need help getting a job, that's fatiguing and exhausting, right? So what I often say to people is think of all of this like a dartboard, okay? When you play darts, you're aiming for the bullseye, right? You're not aiming for the outer ring. No one says, I'm going to win at darts by firing to the outside edge. You're always going for the bullseye. You may hit that outside edge, but you're aiming for the bullseye. Right. When you're asking of your network, aim for the bullseye. People are always so afraid to do that. But when you ask,
or what do you mean by the bullseye?
Precisely what you want. Right? Because you then give your network a radius to operate from. But so take the one of I'm looking for a job. If someone just emailed you saying, hey, Terry, didn't know if you saw, made redundant, I'm looking for a job.
Right.
And you're like,
they'll be amorphous.
You're like, are you looking for a job at Verizon? Or are you looking for a job at NBC Universal? Are you looking for your old job? Are you looking for a change? Now you need to ask a bunch of questions and you're like,
no.
I'm exhausted. Thank you, but not no. But if they said to you, Terry,
that's a full-time job for me, by the way.
What's that?
That could be a full-time job for me.
Why should you play 20 questions? And people are always afraid, if I'm specific, they'll say they don't know. But when you're specific, you get, the hamster wheel turning in people's heads. So better that someone would reach out to you saying, hey, Terry, I've been laid off. This is a great time for me to rethink things. Remember a conversation we had a couple years ago? And I'm thinking, now's the time for me to go and do, name it. And then you're like, yes, I can focus on that and I can help you.
And what I like is when that's followed up with, and can I get 15 minutes of your time or 10 minutes of your time? In other words, they send out the calendar invite. It's an hour long. No. Be respectful.
Right. No, I always sort of say, ask for what you want. Don't tell the other person how you'd like to receive it. In the sense of, if someone asks you for specific information, you decide. Right. You, whose network and reputation and experience is being imposed upon, you decide. Because you may say, oh my God, I got an idea. Get on the phone with me right now. Or you may say, you know what? I'm talking to someone about that at the work from home series in a week. You're going to want to listen in and then touch base with me after that. You, the person who's being imposed upon, you set the rules and drive the car in terms of how and when you're prepared to connect or network with someone. I hate, one of those things I hate is when people send you a calendar invite or they suggest a precise time and a place to have coffee. No, 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 no. I hate it when people do that.
Okay.
Hate it.
Well, relating it back to the sort of the scenario that we're in now, this sort of lockdown, one observation I have is that, and it was one of the premises of launching this webinar series, was people are going to want to hear from us, right? Over communicate. Now, this is a broadcast mode, but I have found that, I have had more email and text and WhatsApp messages from folks, many of whom I was in regular contact with, many of whom were not, and they were just, hey, checking in. By the way, it's really, really good if you use someone's name when you're checking in. It doesn't feel like a blast text. Hey, pal, check it in. Hope you're doing well. You and the family. It's like, come on.
And they text it to you, and their number is not associated with your address book. And someone sent me a text, and they said, I bought sheets that remind me of you because I used to have cats. So they had the cats on the sheets, right? I know it's a bit naughty saying that, but anyway, I still don't know who sent me this.
Yeah.
Yeah, still don't know. So yes, put your name in when you text.
But I mean, these are good. I think people want to talk. What I've found is, I'll reach out and at the beginning of the pandemic, I was sort of like pinging people, going, hey, checking in. Hope things are well, blah, blah, blah. And you get back, thanks, everyone goes to the health part for, right? We're all healthy. We're here in wherever, New York, Pennsylvania, East Hampton, lockdown. And I usually wait for a signal. They're like, hey, love to chat, love to just get on the phone. And by the way, increasingly I'm doing phone calls. Phone calls, does not have to be frickin' Zooms, okay? Phone calls where you just get on and they just want to hear what's going on. Hey, what are you hearing? Right? Because we probably have a cadence of a dialogue that was, more, in the course of 2 months, we'd probably speak at one point in those 2 months. So this is sort of natural and normal. And I'm finding people want to talk. They want to hear from you.
Right.
Presumably that can be utilized or affected for what I'll call the, if you think of networking in the context of like a marketing funnel, in marketing, you've got two things. You've got customer acquisition, so that's finding new people, new connections in the case of networking, or there's sort of maintenance of existing relationship or customer relations. And I have found that during the pandemic, the customer relations part is actually fine. People you already know, staying in touch with them, they want to hear from you. You can nurture and keep those relationships over Zoom. How do you do the former? I'm going to quote a quote that from your book where you were quoting Frank Kimball.
Oh, Frank. Oh, great mentor.
We're talking about sort of the in-person connections that we obviously can't do now that there's no conferences. I mean, effectively disguised as, these are all recruiting conferences disguised as industry conferences, as far as I'm concerned. But he said, until you take the final step in connecting in person, the network is incomplete and useless. If that's the case, Kelly, Hoey, how do you do the customer acquisition? How do you find new people during this time of restricted connections?
You look after the people you already got.
Okay.
Think about it.
You need the one hop.
Well, how do you stay? I mean, I think it's always been sort of the way. Well, first of all, you got to look at your network. Hopefully it is diverse. Hopefully it's like in the sense that you're not sitting there swimming in a little, cesspool of the same types of people, like the same background, the same country club, the same. Because the network I bring to the table right now, you and I may have some overlap, but there's a heck of a lot that isn't the same.
Yep.
Somebody else, like, hey, shout out to anyone in New Zealand who's watching this, because friends of mine in New Zealand saw me posting about this. So all of a sudden they discover LUMA Partners and the work from home, webinar series, right? So how are you looking after and how are you nurturing your existing network so they're talking about it with their networks? In terms of meeting a whole new network, I mean, frankly, I think this is a great time to discover the networks and the relationships you want to be part of. And I say that because, people's behavior is shining through loud and clear right now.
Right.
And the networks and the relationships, the conferences, the associations, the organizations, all those things where we would spend our optional time and money to meet with our industry peers or further our careers, who's helping who right now is really showing. And you want to be in the networks that are looking after people. So this is a good time to observe, like, what are they doing online? How are they being responsive? You know, how are they connecting people? What are the tools they're providing? Or are they just got a placeholder that says, sorry, we're canceled this year. Hope you'll be back with us next year. Yeah, I don't need that. Thanks.
Got it. Yeah, and let's face it, it's not like marketing in the sense that you're not doing any cold emails. I mean, cold emails to nurture a network if it's something you want a decision on in the course of the next short time. I mean, you could count the number of people who reached out to you cold and you did something significant for, like, on these two fingers right here.
Right. I mean, a few weeks ago, if you had a cold email that said that you had, I don't know, some personal protective, you know, wear, or some, you know, a N95 mask, you probably get a response. But other than that, no. Again, this is again thinking, if you're thinking about building new networks, look at your existing network. Start thinking about how you're engaging with them and thinking about what their networks are. And if it really, because I had a point in my career, Terry, where truly I had a couple points where I did not have the network. And you know, you go and you say, fine, I can do some educated research, figure out where those people are that I should be meeting. Now let me look and see how they're engaging. Because you can find ways to integrate yourself and get involved, even though we are in an entirely digital world at the moment.
So I'm going to field a couple of questions here and then encourage more people, if they have questions, to submit. So Danil Grzenkov asks, being helpful is obvious, but if you want to help, but you're not in a position to help, you just simply can't help, you know, is that going to come across as empty words? I think, Danil, that this falls in that category of, you know, the radical candor part. Like, just have no filter, just be honest. If you can't help someone, and I've done this, someone said, hey, I'm looking for such and such. I'm like, we don't do trading here. I don't even know anybody in trading. I wouldn't know the first thing to say. Can't be helpful, sorry. And be upfront about it. Like, don't duck and hide from the email going, oh Christ, you know, he's asking me for something I can't do. Just tell him I can't be helpful. You know what? Besides, they're not sitting there probably waiting and praying on your one answer. They probably sent it out to a whole bunch of people. So the sooner they get back a response, here's me, the amateur, responding here first. I don't know why, but I think that's probably helpful for them. They can move on to folks who may be able to help them. You know what?
A fast no is better than a long maybe, you know, like.
Oh yeah. It's like venture capital.
Yeah, exactly.
Fast no's are valuable. John Durham asks a question around givers and takers. Have you seen examples, sustainable examples, where people that are always taking and never giving? This is asked by one of the greatest givers in all of the industry, John Durham of Catalyst SF, a fantastic guy and a fantastic firm, who's asking about, you know, do you see bad actors? Do you see people who warrant karma?
Yeah. I mean, some of them I refer to them as Death Eaters, you know, a little Harry Potter reference, because, you know, people who come and suck the life out of you. Like, you know, when you see them at an event or in your inbox, like, you just know, right? I got a friend from high school. I think I humor myself by waiting for the it's like a 7-year cycle on the emails. And inevitably it's because he needs something. And I've never quite said piss off, because it humors me. Like, oh, we've been through that 7-year cycle again, and she's not asking for something.
These are relationships between humans, right? So they require nurturing, they require some amount of maintenance.
Right. But there are people who do that, and yeah, they do exist. But I think it's one of those things to sort of acknowledge that they do, and then look in the mirror and check your own behavior. And some of this to be a giver is like, it doesn't take that much. Like, God, like saying hello to, like, thinking about when you went into an office, did you say hello? Did you open the door? Did you, offer up a suggestion? Did you speak up for somebody else in a meeting? Did you replace the paper in the printer? Like,
Right.
this is just, how are you decent so that other people want to take your calls?
Yeah. So you and I could just come to this realization when you mentioned you were first time author at age 50, which,
Yep.
you know, and you're only 36, so I'm not really sure how that works, but Benjamin Button, Kelly Hoey, but I mean, you and I share one thing in common, which is we both changed our careers, you know, reasonably late-ish in the game. It was the birth of my second son at the age of 47 when I came to the realization that the firm I was working for that it wasn't working. My approach and their approach were incongruous, and that it behooved me to have to launch my own entity. It was never my plan. I was not always saying, oh my God, I'll launch my own firm. Of course, now looking back 10 years later, I mean, thank God I did.
Obvious.
I was born never to have a boss, because, you know, I always you know, ruffled around the edges at things like direction. But I'm so glad that I did. But I did come to that decision quite late, right? 47, launching a career when there were, you know, launching an investment bank when there were 127 other investment banks that purported to give strategic advice in digital media. So I'm like, well, the world doesn't need a 128th one, but, you know, so can I do something that is truly differentiated, that's different, build a global brand, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like thinking about it, and I probably asked a dozen, you know, trusted people whom I work with in the industry, to try and get a litmus sense of, is this even doable? Am I crazy to have this idea that this is workable? And the overwhelming feedback from folks, Andrew Siegel, Zach Colas, there's a long list of folks I initially reached out to, said, are you fucking nuts? No, it's a no-brainer, do it. And they actually got mad at me that I didn't do it immediately. I waited a couple of months and then pulled the ripcord. But here's the notion: entirely impossible to do if there wasn't this groundswell, this network, this usable sort of trust, this body of where people were willing to lean in and give you the benefit of the doubt.
And they could have told you, you're nuts, don't do it. Or they could have sat you down and said, Terry, actually your skill set is this. But you were hitting it. You had people to turn to. You asked me early on in our conversation, you said, you know, kind of what readers had pulled from my book, the things I hadn't thought about. And I have interviewed two of the readers of my book based on their book reviews.
Yep.
And one of them, and I'm pulling this, it's the page 60. And he has his own business. And Chris, every time he starts a new project, he pulls out my book and he pulls the diagram at page 60 and he figures out where he's at with the idea. And based on where he's at with the idea, whether he needs to do more research, he's very specific on who in his network he needs to tap to help him with it, whether it's with the idea or taking the idea forward or whatever it is. And I think, you know what, it's to me, it's got echoes of what you're describing in terms of, do you have people to lean on? And when you've got a new idea, who can you turn to? Who can you turn to ask? And do you have a trusted circle of people who will be just so bluntly honest with you to tell you whether or not it's a good idea or it's your strength, or do they tell you something you didn't see in yourself? Which
it sounds like same thing with you, right? You leverage that network, that feedback, that honest feedback in deliberating as to whether you write that book and basically change the course of your career with your dream network.
Yeah. Absolutely what happened. And sometimes we need networks. When I think of, you know, kind of a stepping stone to where I am now, sometimes we need networks to see bigger visions of what we can be and can do. And, you know, Janet Hansen with 85 Broads was that for me, where she, you know, offered me a position. So, you know, for people right now who have been made, you know, kind of redundant, we go back to that again, people are looking for opportunities. Think about how you're operating and contributing to the networks you're already in. Because Janet saw in me things that I had not seen in myself in terms of my career possibility, but she saw it because I showed up. Right. And I contributed and I added value. And I was doing that because I was figuring out what 85 Broads was all about as a women's business networking group.
Yep.
And I was using what I was learning and thinking and processing it for the job I was doing at the time, which was building out a global alumni program for a major law firm. But she saw the activity and then said, I'm going to create a role for you that's never existed. So, you know, your networks can either validate what you're feeling or you know, kind of give you some feedback on an idea you're testing, or they may just say, you know what, you're nuts.
Yeah, don't do it.
Or you're nuts. What, you've been doing this all your life. What you really should be doing is this, because this is what you are.
I when people come in, I ask the question, I say, you know, I'm trying to parse small, medium, large. Should you be working for a smaller startup where low salary, high equity upside, or, you know, medium to large size, you know, startup where, you know, you're going to get a little bit more salary, limited upside, or should you be working a large company that's, you know, more stable and mostly salary? And I find that there is the aspirational, some people are like, oh, they're in love with the romantic idea of a startup that they can get an exit and make a fortune, all that kind of stuff. And then you ask them, it turns out they got 4 kids in private school and, you know, their wife doesn't work. In other words, you do the math and you're like, wait a second, I just calculated your fixed nut is you need to work at whatever, you know, XYZ large company with a large salary. Because people sometimes don't necessarily do the honest math.
Mm-hmm. The math is good. Doing the math is good. Because you know what? When you do the math, you can bring your full self to your job.
Yeah.
You know, and I often say to people, you've got 3 assets in life.
Okay.
You know, you've got your relationships. You know, you got your reputation. And then you've got this other thing, you know, you've got your bank account. And you've got to think about that because you know, it enables you to take risks. If you've got that kind of yes me fund, you can go and take risks in your career, or you can take risks like in terms of starting your own thing, going to a startup, not worrying about the salary, or you've got the ability to say, right, I'm going to make a hard decision at work because I don't care if they fire me or not.
Right. Trish Goodall has a good question here about pro bono. Should you, sort of double-edged sword, should you in this time, if you're laid off, you're in between stuff, should you do stuff for free? I could see arguments either way to sort of get your foot in the door and then maybe, you know, build relationships and pursue a more remunerative model later. What say you, Kelly, on that kind of consideration?
Oh, there's a podcast episode on that. An entire 9 minutes of my answer on that on the Build Your Dream Network podcast. But the answer is sometimes, yes, it's a really smart idea. And other times it's not. It's, you know, think about it right now. You and I are giving away our expertise for free. The series you give it. So that's a good idea. You know,
you're giving away your expertise. I'm just talking. Yeah.
No, so, but you know, you doing this work from home webinar series, that's giving your stuff away for free, right? So there's times where it's a really good idea. There's times where there's an example in my book, Evan Nisselson, when he was looking for a job in an area where he had no experience, only an interest. This was back when he wasn't investing. He was interested in photography. Based on an informational interview, he asked a really smart question. He said, if you were hiring to this photographer, he said, if you were hiring, what would the role be? Mm-hmm. And when the person described the role, you know, it took Evan a while and he thought about it. He goes, oh, I just need to send them like a sample of what the job would be. So he actually did work to prove he could do the work. Mm-hmm. So there may be a time where you want to pitch someone, right, and you in essence have to put in some investment time of your own to show them that you can do it. Sure. But saying, hey, I'll come into the office 3 days a week and do this for the next 4 weeks. Right. That's not like in the category of unpaid internships. No.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I feel the same way. I mean, sometimes when you're leaning in on a client situation, our perspective is just start helping them. If it gets serious, we'll discuss a remunerated, engagement and a proper and get going. But
Right.
we don't even know whether things go or not. And so the upfront work, sure, I call it,
Right.
business development.
Right.
So Umair Azam has a question about, he asks, I guess directed towards me, since I said I launched a new career and my own firm at age 47. What gave me the confidence that I'd be successful on my own? Well, Umair, you obviously don't know me. I was born confident. No, seriously. So here was the consideration, Umair. What I was talking about was setting up an M&A boutique to provide advice in the media and technology sectors. I had at that point been providing advice in the media and technology sectors very successfully for 20 years. So from the standpoint of my confidence in being able to provide quality advice, including, some of the biggest deals in the world, AOL, Time Warner, et cetera, $300 billion worth of transactions, that I had no question on my provision. The question was, would I get hired? Would someone hanging on a shingle at a very small firm with a niche focus, would I get hired, and what would I have to do? And so I did things like I built an advisory council, advisory board, which I populated with the most incredible people in the industry with whom I'd worked with and knew me and trusted me, and they were happy to be on my advisory board. But what that did, just in case it was needed, belt and suspenders, I knew I could do the work, but in case people were looking and saying, I don't know, do I hire this new firm? Should we risk it, or should we just go with the old usual ones? You could look to that as yet another sort of proof positive that, okay, this thing's got the sort of good housekeeping seal of approval, if you will.
And what I would add on to that, Terry, sort of think, hearing the question and your experience, my experience, it's like, this is one of those things. You never know if you're going to be successful, but what do you know, right? You know what's between your ears, because no one, like, invest in your own knowledge, be curious, be a lifelong learner, because no one can take that from you.
Yeah.
If you've invested in relationships, and you have personal connections in terms of, you've not like, those are the firm's clients. You have made it a point of investing in other people. If you've got knowledge and you've got, connection or relationships, you may not know what your next thing is, but you do know that you can make it happen because you have both of those. And that's, you never know if it's going to be successful, but you can make it, and you sort of say, hey, what's the worst case scenario? That's the other piece on all of it, of why you always want to be, I want to say, visible. So I like to say to people, it's not who you know or what you know, it's who knows what you know. Like, what do people know that you do and you do well, right? Have you shown that you're prepared to master skill sets? Because you can follow back on your worst case scenario. So if LUMA Partners hadn't worked, worst case scenario, what? You go back to one of the traditional investment banks and do M&A for them? But, that's right. And I had that moment, when I was writing my book, that kind of like, what am I doing, right? Maybe I should go back and get a JOB. And I had a recruiter call and offer me, in essence, the job I had back in 2004, a manager of professional development for a global law firm. And I thought to myself, you know what? If that's my worst case scenario, like, my worst case scenario is not, living under a bridge and being homeless.
Right, you can pay the bills.
If my worst case scenario is to say, I tried, it didn't work, I got to take a job, and I got to go back to that kind of, that's not a bad scenario.
Got it.
So,
So I think I want to end. I'm noticing it's coming up on 10 minutes after the hour, so I want to wrap things up here. For some reason, we're always around 70 or so minutes for this webinar. Is that where I want to end up is specifically related to this sort of lockdown. There was you've heard the line, "Don't let a good crisis go to waste."
Yeah.
Nothing good about it. But I think the underlying point there is, don't let this pass you. I was on the phone with my nephew about a month ago, and actually 2 months ago, sort of right at the outset of this. And he was, he's graduating, he's now graduated without a job and sort of somewhat lamenting, his circumstance in life. And my advice to him was, well, number one, that sucks, right? Graduating in 2020, you got a lump of coal in the bag for trick or treat. So it's not good, but consider a couple things. Number one is, you've heard the line, we're all in it together. Well, we're not, but you are. The class of 2020 is all in it together in the sense that global pandemic affecting everyone. You don't have a job, don't worry about it. Nobody's got a job. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I call it the Great Reset because I said, look, you didn't have a job, you have whatever, B-, average, solid, but not, you're not in line for that sort of Goldman Sachs intern, position. Don't worry about it. The last 4 years of your life, you can wipe all those out now because we have what I'm calling the Great Reset. Because what's going to happen in 3, 6, 9, 12, 18 months, however long this takes, the very first time he sits down with a recruiter, there's the first question, and really the only question that's going to matter is, what did you do?
Right.
What did you do? Are you, because let's face it, when we make a hire, we're making a presumption about the qualities of the person on the basis of representations, right? And yet, we all know actions speak louder than words. So here is an actual, this is not a dry run, right? We get to see whether this person is a laid back, gonna let things happen to them, be reactive and go, oh, shit, and watch a bunch of Netflix, or whether they're gonna say, no, fuck it, I'm going to take charge, I'm gonna do something. And by the way, something could be anything. Learn a language, take a course, volunteer, I don't know, there's a million things, but not let your answer be,
I got a master's in Netflix.
Yeah, I got caught up in a bunch of Netflix. It's going to be the one answer, the one question that's going to be determined whether you hire the person or not. Or do I have a proactive, take charge person who so make sure that, whatever it is you do, just set out a plan and waste no time. Like, don't do it next week, start now. And, sure enough, it took me up on that, and hopefully that'll all.
And while you're doing it, let your network know what you're doing, because you may recruit other people. You may find out that they've got, other ideas for you that may say, oh my God, look at this person go. There's the kind of person I want to refer on. You may get yourself top of mind with people just in general if they're seeing activity. So share it out with your network as well.
Cool. Kelly, this was a lot of fun and very insightful, as I fully expected it to be. For those of you out there, get the book, Build Your Dream Network. It is really a great reference piece for life and careers. I thank you for joining me here on the LUMA's Work From Home webinar series. For all of you, thank you for participating, and join me next week, May 24th, when I'll have Rashad Tabakawala, one of my dear friends, join me for a fantastic, unfiltered, look out, no holds barred conversation about radical candor. This is Terence Kawaja signing off.